Hello and welcome to another Overlord lore video, and today we are going to dive into precisely how the day-to-day life in a dark elf village is in general structured, as well as how the lives of the elves in the Forest of Ivasha in general are looking like. And since the groundwork had already been laid in other parts of my little elf series, we can dive straight into the content. But of course only after I say thank you very much to all of my Patreons for supporting this channel, as well as all users of the YouTube thanks function for making one-time donations. Also please check out my fantasy channel for even more elven content. Now with all of that said, we will start with the general makeup of the entire village. It is, as previously mentioned, made out of elven trees, who are grown and very much nurtured by magic, as well as more conventional means, dung collected from larger animals, as well as water, milk, and other more conventional means as providing the trees with nutrients and everything else it needs to grow. And the magic can also shape the trees, making it grow with a partially sealed cavity in the center of it, which is then inhabited by the elves. And Einzelgone, who had disguised himself as an elf, arrived in the dark elf village, as well made remarks of how small the interior is. Though it had to be said that Eins, after years of living in the Great Tomb of Nezuric, which was in part modeled after Neuschwanstein Castle, which itself is just a fancy, dreamy, idealized castle based on the concept of medieval castles half a millennia earlier, Einzelgone's sense of space might also ever be slightly altered by his day-to-day activities within the Grey Tomb. For Eins himself, as well as Aura and Mare, could live, sleep, and in case of the two Dark Elven twins, eat in this home. Which brings us to the next point. The elves don't have the same sense of privacy that we do, and apparently like to peer into the homes of other villagers. Whether or not this is just a mechanism to check if their next of kin, their friends and tribe is still alive, or if they all were just curious enough to actually get a better view on the new visitors, is debatable. After all, most visitors came from the other dark elven village and not from outside the great forest of Ivasha. And now, speaking about the absence of their relatives, the Dark Elves actually came to the great forest of Ivasha 300 years before Einzelgone had arrived in the New World, which is quite interesting, for we know that they originally lived in the Forest of Top, and that the sealed evil tree that Eins and basically all floor guardians fought against was a great danger there. Again, Eins had assembled the entire floor guardians to deal with it. Since the Great Migration had taken place 300 years ago, we could also assume that the sealed evil tree was also catapulted into the New World, like Einzelgone had been centuries later. Or that perhaps the player, with the world-class item that fought Deep Darkness Dragonlord in the web novel, and lost his world-class item thanks to the Dragonlord to the Dragonlord, could have potentially spawned this monstrosity with the world-class item, as maybe a last resort, a great summoning, only for the great summoning then to appear at the surface of the world, while the player had to fight off a Dragonlord in the cavern deep below the great forest of Top. And this uprooting of the Dark Elves had also left a deep rift, a chasm, between the old and the young generation in the forest of Ivasha. While the elders upheld tradition and a hierarchy in which the elders, aka themselves, would rule the village, the younger generations would propose another social order, in which those with the most suitable skills, talents and abilities should take the reins of power for themselves. And this rift likely had occurred because the life in the Forest of Ivasha was even more dangerous than in the Forest of Top, which in and of itself held many dangers as well, and thus was completely unfit to any human inhabitation of any kind. So this rift had opened with a changed environment, which is in regards to the Wild Elves which will get a video or a short of their own, a very powerful influence on the Dark Elven village. And speaking of powerful, the elves don't stand at the top of the food chain. Their village had just about 200 inhabitants, and even a single Ankylorus lord would have been more than enough to actually wipe out the entire village and scatter the Dark Elves into the wider forest, uprooting them once again. And even just the movement patterns of the normal Ankylorus were, just like any greater predator, part of the day-to-day concern of the villagers, especially of the hunters, which is a catch-all term that encompasses everyone regardless if they were now a bow specialist, a ranger, a summoner, and basically anybody else fit to kill animals. Something like a dedicated warrior was known in the village, since the population was too small as to have even a single soul becoming a professional fighter, since everyone who could fight would have to put their talents to better use by simply hunting game, or even just collecting fruits. So once the Elf King called and demanded that the village would send soldiers to the royal capital, the Dark Elves would have sent hunters, which in the Great Forest of Ivasha also makes a lot more sense, since elf live not only with, but also on and in trees, with few contacts if at all to the ground. This is also done in order to avoid predators, and speaking of them, the hunters would also know which larger animals would own which territory. For example, an Ankylursus would expand its territory when it grows, but always stay in the same established territory, and quickly ascend to the top of their local food chain. So these fiercely territorial and aggressive beasts would then also tag any other dangerous beast strolling through their own territory in order to secure their hunting grounds, which are then monitored by the elven hunters to the point that they would have to check how a fight between two rival Ankylursus would have ended and whether or not any territorial changes occur. Such knowledge is vital to the village, so much so that even entire hunts would have been postponed for days, because it was just that much of a safety concern. And speaking of hunts, while we don't know about all game in the forest, Aura, once she joined up with the hunters of the Dark Elven villages, hunted also a beast known as the Giga Elk, already a great beast in our world, and even more monstrous and dangerous and rich in nutrients in the Great Forest of Ivasha. And normally the elf hunters would be staying in the trees instead of the ground, in order to avoid a potential counterattack, for despite the imposing antlers of the Giga Elk, it could chase through the dense forest without any problems at all, thanks to the ability of Forest Walker, the same trait Fenrir, Aura's mighty beast, possessed. And even Aura, albeit with a much more weaker, shoddier, low-tier bow, needed 2 arrows in order to bring this beast down. Which of course brings us to the diet. The Dark Elves living in the Forest of Ivasha live also from the Forest of Ivasha, and thanks to their magic even grow food in the Dark Elven village. Dark Elf druids would move soil via spells from the ground onto the treehouse gardens in the upper and mid-tier section of the forest, so that vegetables could be grown there. But the fruits and vegetables weren't grown selectively, and therefore could be a little hard to eat from our own point of view. Insects were also a welcome food source, and a good source of protein, and considering that the spiders could actually grow large enough to eat the elves, this snack that bites back could also become the main course, which at least in the time I stayed in the village wasn't the case. Instead, the hunted Giga Elk was served, but while the meat was surely rich in nutrients, it tasted bland and wasn't very well prepared, at least in the opinions of Aura and Mare, for Einzelgorn could not eat or drink, and therefore had to rely on the taste of the 2 floor guardians. And lastly, we shall dive into the general organization of the village. Old people, the storage facilities, as well as the treehouse market square were all situated at the center of the village, while the hunters would patrol the outside edges of the village. the village also cultivated patches of strong-smelling herbs in the region in order to cover up their own smell, because predators would avoid these strong-smelling areas, since in a forest like Iwasha, temporarily losing one's sense of smell was not unlike losing your eyesight to a human. It leaves you unable to hunt, but also quite exposed to any dangerous approaches from other dangerous beasts, now taking advantage of your temporarily dulled sense of smell. And aside from the elders and the hunters, the village also had druids and a pharmacist inside of it that I spent quite a lot of time with. Any travel to other villages would also have been quite dangerous by nature, since it meant crossing the forest of Iwasha. And that's precisely how the Dark Elf village works, in quite a lot more detail, and the same applies to other Dark Elf villages as well, as of course to many Wood and High Elven village, aside from the capital of course. And next time we will take a look at Einsulgon's stay in the Dark Elf village. But for today, this is it. Please let me know your opinion about the village and the video in the comment section, and I say thank you very much for watching, and special thanks to Arder Daddy Arder, Bad Guy Ye, Bad Burrito 316, Beezer, Ben C, Brandon D, Chrissy, Crowley 0221, Sia, Crystal Prime, Dead Slime, Death is Mercy, Deathless Dragonlord, Demon Xenomorph 1987, Devin Downen, Ding Dang, Duckwagon, Dunkler Krieger, Dystopia, Dystopia II, Enigmatic Unicorn, Feral Shivan, Guy with Dead Head, Hector Marino, Hoss, Huster, Jacob G, Jana B, Jason, J. Morris, Chromius, Kyle R, Lee K. Long, Legendarius, Lelouch Britannia with a Mustache, Lexus Fox, Lord Nishikian Rai, Lord Touch Me, Love Razor, Mervek, Mr. Shoes, Mr. Tweaker, Michael R, Michael Y, Nope, Oh Hell No, Normal Toad, O'Kill, Overlord General Gasper, Paddy Phantom, Personage, Primus 11, Q-Ne Karakos P, Shergox's Daddy, Shadow Lightning Wolf, Shrine Keeper, Super Tier Magic Batista Bomb, Supreme Cheese, Staris, Ted, Texas Deer, The Orc Warboss, Rocket Smasher, T.E. Wang, Vash Hawkeye, Vegito 27, Venture Fanatic, Wilhelm, Xenokai, and Zonagon. Thanks guys. Anyway, have a nice day, and I hope to see you all again soon under my next video.